Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Talking Loud. And by late, I mean this is an episode that we should have put out a long time ago, but now we're finally doing it because there's no new episodes coming out. So let's play some catch up and talk about season 2, shall we? But before we get to that, I have to introduce our members. We have the Anglophile Gamer.
Yeah.
We have Yoshi Player.
What's up?
We have muppetspot.
Hello.
Oh, and of course, I'm CynicTheCritic. So we have all four of us here. It's just the four of us today, which is fitting because, again, we're going to be talking about season 2 with the best episodes and the worst episodes. Now, what would you say, do you guys want to, let's get like a general opinion on season 2. Like, what would you say is your overall opinion on the season?
Overall, it's an improvement of season 1, even though there are some few minor.
You know, looking back on my season 1 review, looking at it, there were only about, I don't know, over 20 episodes I thought were good. But man, there were a lot of episodes I thought were just mediocre or outright bad. And they gave us some of the worst episodes of the show as of right now. I mean, I don't even need to list them. It's a 4 Times Loud House, Making the K, Sound of Silence, The Greenhouse. So many bad episodes came out in season 1, and yeah, there were still definitely plenty of good episodes. So I think it's fair for me to say that I thought season 2 was a massive improvement because, holy crap, we got a lot more good episodes this season.
Oh yeah, there are definitely some infamous episodes that very much are terrible, but I don't know, there's really only one, in my opinion, that I say was the absolute worst, even though I think for season 1 there were even more episodes that I would consider the worst.
Yeah, even for the bad episodes
that came out, but overall there was a lot more good than bad. There were about 30 episodes that came out in season 2 that I would put either in my good or great tier, which is really saying something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot for me to choose from when it comes to what I put on my best list. I mean, there are also still some stuff I would put on my worst list, but even then, if I had to put my dishonorable mentions, some of my dishonorable mentions I would say are episodes that I think are just mediocre than outright terrible. So I mean, that definitely shows that season 2, it was definitely the better season overall. So, but before we can talk about the best, we have to talk about the worst episodes, which this is definitely going to be interesting with all of us on here.
Yep. So we're just gonna list a list, and we're gonna do it in a particular order. We'll do it from this person to that person.
Right. We're gonna each. Some of us. Well, unfortunately, not all of us have dishonorable mentions, Vossie. So usually, how it would go is we would list off our dishonorable mentions briefly, and then talk about our worst list from 5 to 1. And the same thing will go for our best list as well, where we talk about the honorable mentions and then 5 to 1. So it's pretty simple.
So the order that we're doing it here is we're going to do Vossie first, then Muppet, then me, and then we'll let Drew be the last one because he's the host.
Alright, so let's let Vossie go first.
Okay, so when it comes down to this, I honestly kept both arguments pretty brief. But, yeah, let's start with the worst. At number 5, I put The Crying Name, and this only made the list mostly because Season 2 had a lot of alright episodes and good ones that it was hard to choose, anything else for this list for a number 5 spot. Crying Name more made it because it's completely obnoxious. The basic premise is you got this, Lily won't stop, I think it's Lily won't stop crying, so they gave him the Pet in the Box, which turns into this demon toy of whatever that just has the sun and is just annoying as hell. I remember the first time I watched this episode, I was like, I need to listen to some music right now. And it has one funny line moment, but otherwise it's just kind of mediocre, forgettable, and an absolute pain in the ear. It is annoying, to say the least. It really only made the list because I don't have any other options, though. So, yeah, that's that. Number 4, Cheater by the Dozen. This is an episode that's more... I might as well just ask a bunch of questions about it. Why does Clyde really care if Clyde's about cheating on Lori? Actually, screw that. Why is he even in this episode? Can we ask that first? Why is he even in this episode? Yeah, I know you rabid Clyde fans are going to come at me and fight me if you really want to, but why is he in this? And Lincoln's sisters really don't need to be in this either. That's 11 unnecessary characters, which is just like, why? Also, how can they kill him? Also, during the sequence in the beginning with the phone call, why? How can the sisters hear Clyde? Like, how? I don't get that. Or are we only doing that because we need them? They're needed for the plot somehow. There's like, I think it tries to have some mystery element, but it really doesn't have one, and it's not even that funny of an episode, and really, it's just a mess. I don't really see why people would like this one. So number 3 is Change of Heart. This episode is just bogged down to it could have like stopped the whole crush thing with Lori and Clyde, but guess what? You didn't. You wasted your entire potential. Sure, season 3 hasn't done with it much, but it's like you just wasted your potential here to stop something that's incredibly annoying, and I don't think many people will disagree with me on that. Lenny and Mr. Grouse are the standouts here, and I guess that one joke about lemonade kind of got me a bit, but that's it. Nothing's resolved, and it's like, why is Laurie willing to just accept Clyde just for his gifts, mind you, despite the fact that she already has a boyfriend? Dude, did you forget that you have a boyfriend, or at least at the right? Seriously, what? I don't get that. Like, if Laurie already has a boyfriend, then why? I don't get it. And yeah, once again, these are really brief. Except maybe these last 2. Next 2 is Bro and the Family. Listen, I know it's cliche to hate this episode, but I can't. I can't not. Like, I don't have a problem when the sisters fight constantly. That's not really something I have. But this episode just turns it to a ridiculous degree that it's not worth it. And like, why does Lincoln get locked out of his own room over something that started with a petty argument, and then him making it worse? And apparently, actually, why does Lincoln make it worse? Because he does? I don't get that at all.
And he fixed the fight a Space Invader.
The problem is that he also fixes the problem by leaving the house. That's something I don't get either. Like, Lincoln's literally just like, I don't get it. It's just like, they're just constantly fighting over something that starts over something as petty as a dress. Just because Lori and Lenny buy the exact same dress, it just starts a stupid fight throughout the entire family, and then all these arguments just start off one after another over stupid stuff. But yeah, no, this episode is not very good. It just, yeah, I see why this episode's hated by so many people. And of course, it's the one you're waiting for me to tear apart. Not allowed. I'm just gonna go like, whatever. Okay. Not Allowed is basically a Clink and McCloud episode, something that has already been done to death, with a coat of fan pandering paint on it towards a theory that is already stupid, that proceeds to debunk that theory in a way that's even stupider than the theory that they're trying to debunk, alongside the fact that it's going to be dated in 4 to 8 years, because of course you shoot out a president, and because the show runs on a floating timeline, then basically his birth years are going to constantly change, basically. So as it changes, the president in office is going to change, meaning that it will be dated. Then we're going to go throw in a running joke. We're going to throw in a running joke, repeat it umpteen hundred times, and no matter how many times you repeat it, it's not funny. The first time wasn't funny, so it wasn't. This episode exists for literally one reason, and it's fan pandering. Like, why do you put Clyde in this episode is my problem. And, like, he doesn't need to be here. Honestly, yeah, no, this is... I don't really have much more to say about, like, any of these. Like, I try not to get ridiculously angry this time around, but it's like, this episode just has so many problems, so yeah, that's basically it. Once again, this was ridiculously brief, but there we go.
Alright, so now, Muppet, it's your turn.
Alright, I have about 3 dishonorable mentions. My first dishonorable mention is No Such Luck. You're probably wondering, Mr. Muppet, why did you not put No Such Luck in one of your worst spots? Well, it's simple. It's a dead topic. It needs to die off. The episode is it's bad, but it's a floating timeline. One of the good things about this cartoon. And plus, Lincoln gets everything back, and he's not in a stupid squirrel suit. So stop it with your fan fiction, stop it with your fan art, stop with this whole episode, and just move on and watch something else. Like, I don't know, watch Mystery Science Theater or something. Number 2 is going to piss off a lot of you people, but I don't even care at this point. My number 2 spot is No Way Out. Yeah. Come at me, you Lana fans. Except you, Vossie.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm getting
Anyway,
enough hate, so I'm not gonna add on to yours.
Anyway, Snow Way Out is basically what you end off the season. Sure, Mr. Grouse is funny, and the return of Grandma Palmer was nice, but everything else, like the whole episode taking place in a fast food place, is ridiculous. Lenny being, duh, I'm Lenny, and I think you can warm up goulash in it with a hair dryer was stupid. And just Lana's thing of wanting to be a race car driver. Did we ever see this in any other episodes? No. Why do we need to see it here when it's never brought up again? And that in the mid section where they're trying to be funny and they're all cold. Ugh. That was really. Look, if you want to do a funny Blizzard plot, watch Rocco's Bar Live episode, Cabin Fever. That episode is really funny. Snow Way Out is an episode where I was bored. Yes, it's a shitty pun, but I don't even give a flying flamingo at this point. All right, now to the bottom 5. At number 5, I have Change of Heart, because frankly, I forgot about this episode. But come on, you could have had Clyde get over his crush of Lori. One of the worst things in Loud House, but yet you kept it in, which is not even a good joke by any standards. It's one of those jokes where it's like Lori and then Clyde nosebleeds and acts like a robot. That is something where I would feel sorry for. I would take that kid to a therapist to get over that stupid crush. All right, number 4.
I don't know. I heard robot.
I did too.
Okay, I said robot. But anyway, number 4, Brawl the Family. Again, another dead topic, but come on. No more gender bias. You know, if you want to see a good fighting episode, watch, I don't know. Watch it where the siblings are not fighting with each other, but rather their roommate. Watch Room with a Feud if you want a good fighting episode. But it's not like a writer's. But here's one thing I want to say: it's not the writers throwing a bone for everyone after Brawl the Family. It's just another episode. All right, number 3. Oh boy, this is gonna be a long one. Making the grade. Lisa's the worst part of it, and her creating a robot to destroy the project. Why was that even in there? This episode feels like a very season 1 leftover. And you know what else is a season 1 leftover?
What's the season 1 leftover?
Not allowed. That episode feels like a season 1 leftover. And I don't get it. This episode is written by somebody who does Rick and Morty. I understand that you guys want to do this. It's like SpongeBob You're Fired in a way, where it's like, is Lincoln really adopted or is he not? But no, it's really stupid. And plus the joke about Lincoln having holes in his underwear. Why though? He's in his underwear like 50% of the time of the show, and I don't see any holes in them.
That's too much information.
It's a cartoon, so don't be disgusting. But now, time to my worst one. I know I'm gonna get a lot of crap for this. I know somebody's probably gonna send me a bomb in the mail. But anyway, my worst one. Number 1, the whole picture. God, this episode annoys me. Like, why is it here? It was an episode I had high hopes for. I wasn't expecting this is the episode where we see Lincoln's birth and everything. I was hoping to see like a funny episode about Lincoln's memories with some funny ones, some heartwarming ones, but no. It's like all we see is bad memories, and it's like Lincoln's okay with it, but let me tell you, if you were in Lincoln's shoes and you were being remembered of the time where you couldn't bowl because you got your finger stuck, I don't think you would be happy. And besides, the whole ending where the sisters are laughing and cuddling with Lincoln, that's not a happy ending. That's just like, oh, well, at least my sisters remember them. And besides, doesn't Lincoln have a photo album of his baby pictures? And wouldn't he be able to get his files back from the recycling bin? I'm sure computers still have recycling bins. You can get your old files back. I'm sorry, but everyone was written like a Dumbo. The memories weren't that good. Hell, the only thing I would say that's really good is the Garfield reference. That's the only thing I like. Everything else is a total skip for me. So there, I've had it.
Nice. All right, your turn, Yoshi.
All right,
Let's let the robot cool down.
what?
Hey, I am not a robot.
Funny stuff. Alright, so yeah, just like Muppet does, I have a few dishonorable mentions before I actually move on with my worst list. And as for the worst list itself, I'm not going to go too much into it because I already talked about the worst episodes in my every episode of Season 2 reviewed video. In fact, if you want to hear more of me talking about this episode in more detail, just go check out the link in the description. I'm sure you'll find it there. But anyway, my first dishonorable mention goes to the whole picture, which I won't say much about because Muppet already talked about it. But this episode could have had potential to be cute and somewhat funny, but it just throws it out the window, and I do not buy that ending being sweet for a second. Because if I was in Lincoln's shoes, I would probably feel ashamed that I didn't know how to bowl properly when I was 6 years old. Like, I don't think that's something I ever want to remember. My next dishonorable mention, I'm gonna try and get through this without trying to get triggered. GarageBand. That's actually how we pronounce garage here in Australia. We pronounce it as garage, not garage. But yes, GarageBand. Now, before you jump to the comments, let me just briefly say that I don't hate this episode just because of the scene with Luna. That is a problem, but it's not the biggest problem. Everything else is. The comedy is awful. Like, the jokes from Lenny and Lisa were not funny in the slightest. The only joke I liked was from Mr. Grouse when he crashed into his garage with his lawnmower and he's like, "Can I still have your dad's lasagna?" That was the only funny joke I got out of this episode.
Oh, yeah.
But the biggest problem with this episode is just that I feel like Laurie's development just comes across as forced. Like, she doesn't want to move out soon because, oh, she'll be away from her siblings. Which I guess is fine at the current age, but what's going to happen when Laurie turns into an adult and she's eventually going to have to move away? She can't just be all like, "Oh, I want to move back in because I miss my family." It makes me feel like that Laurie's just a person who can't rely on herself. But I'll talk about that more when I get to one of my choices on the worst list, though. Anyway, so my next dishonorable mention is one that I think, in my opinion, is very different compared to everyone else's. That's Fantastic Voyage. I know, I think you guys said you liked this episode, did you?
Yeah, I like it. It's decent.
It's okay. It's
Pretty good.
special.
But,
Well,
yeah, I can see.
The reason I wasn't really a big fan of this one is simply because I see it as a weaker version of Homespun, except not as sweet, not as funny. It just feels all over the place. Like, the jokes just weren't that funny in this episode, and I don't buy for a second that the siblings and Rita all missed Vanzilla, because what positive traits did you have with Vanzilla? It's not like the same things you said about the house. It seems like the only reason you missed it was because Lynn Sr. was being all glossy over the new van. It just seems like that's the only reason you did it, so is that supposed to be a joke? I don't get it. And that subplot involving Laurie and Lenny, that was just completely unnecessary. I don't know why they threw it in there, but at least we got to see Phil Lamar in there, but as a whole, the subplot was just pointless. What did it have to do with the episode? I don't really know. Anyway, so my final dishonorable mention is probably, I think it's actually the only episode I don't like in terms of my dishonorable mentions. That's No Laughing Matter. Before this episode came out, I used to love Luann. She used to be one of my favorite characters on the show, and believe it or not, I used to actually like this episode. But really thinking about it for a minute, did this episode develop Luann in any way? No, it didn't. All I see her as is just a clueless idiot who can't take criticism, and when she's criticized for her work, she just feels the need to give up on it instead of trying to improve on herself. In fact, if you want this kind of story done right, Drew actually did a rewrite on this episode on DeviantArt.
I did. Yeah,
it goes into much more detail on how Luann's feeling, and yes, she gives up, but she also learns that maybe she should try to improve on herself. If the episode was like that, I wouldn't even be on my dishonorable mentions, but the fact that it is like this way just ruined Luann's character for me. She's not the worst sister, she's no Lynn, but man, after this episode I did not feel the same way about her as I did before. So now it's time for my actual bottom 5 for Season 2. So my number 5 spot is going to Making the Grade. This is, as of right now, this is Lisa's worst episode, and I think the reasons are obvious. Lisa just acts really obnoxious in this episode, and the biggest problem with her portrayal here is that she comes off as peer pressure. Like, she doesn't learn this stuff for herself. She just is told what to do and then she'll do it. The Lisa I know wouldn't do that. I've seen episodes where she doesn't really listen to her family and she just does what she thinks is best for everyone. That's who she is, and when I see an episode that doesn't do that, that just doesn't make me feel like I'm seeing Lisa in any way. And every time she's acting normal in this episode, it just comes across as so cringeworthy, and it's not funny, even if it was trying to be funny. But I think the biggest problem with this episode is how Lincoln is treated. Because, holy crap, this episode makes me feel like the writers have some sort of fetish for torturing Lincoln, because, let's be honest, he didn't really do much to deserve his punishment in this episode. Now, I'm gonna tell you exactly what he did, and I want you to pay attention to it. So, basically, once Lisa moves into his class, for some strange reason, everyone now doesn't like Lincoln, because, oh, his sister's a smartass, so even his friends won't let him sit next to him. So one night he goes into her room, he asks her, "Hey Lisa, is it alright if you try to tone down your smart behavior at school?" He asks her to do that, politely by the way, so she does it, and yeah, everything's fine at school. Now Lincoln's friends will let him sit with them again, but now the problem is that everyone loves Lisa. And so now Lincoln isn't really seen that much as a special person anymore, and to make things worse, now his sisters hate him at home. Like, Lisa, whenever someone asks her to do something for her, she's like, "Oh, I can't do it. I'm normal now, thanks to Lincoln." It happens like 4 times in the last second half of the episode, and is it trying to be a joke, or is it trying to rub in the fact that what Lincoln did was wrong? He didn't really do much wrong to deserve his punishment. As I said earlier, all he did was ask her to change a little bit. He didn't force her to do it. He didn't trick her into doing it. He just simply politely asked her to do it. And so when she rubs in this fact, it's incredibly frustrating. And aside from that, the jokes just weren't that funny. I didn't really find much to really like in this episode. But Lisa's behavior is just so frustrating to me. So that's why it's my number 5 spot. The only reason it's lower is because I guess the rest of the episode wasn't really as bad as what I actually just talked about. Alright, so my number 4 spot, I'm not going to say much about it because Vossie pretty much already went into detail about it. Not allowed. Yeah, I'm glad this episode debunked the theory on Lincoln being adopted. In fact, I will give it credit that they did try to make the birth story as over the top as possible, considering all the people's assumptions on it, but that doesn't make it good. It feels completely out of place. And why did this need to be a Clinker McCloud episode? There was no point in it being a Clinker McCloud episode. You could have had a much simpler story, but nope, you couldn't do that. You just had to have them doing the stupid field test gag stunt, which happens like, what, 5 times in the episode? And it's not funny. It's not funny in the slightest, and it's incredibly annoying. Honestly, what is so wrong with the writers trying to do something more down to earth? Why do they always need to cram in all of this cartoony stuff? And yes, I know it's a cartoon, but that's not an excuse. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying a simple story. You can still have comedy in there, but man, this type of episode could have been so much better. Alright, so my 3rd worst episode of Season 2, this is one I want to go into a little bit of length about. It's Change of Heart. Now, remember before when I said that GarageBand kind of unmasked Laurie as a character for me, is how I see her as a person that can't really rely on herself to get what she wants or to be happy? Well, this episode pretty much officially unmasked that, because this is one of Laurie's worst episodes, simply because I now get the implication now she has to rely on other people to get what she wants, because when Clyde is finally trying to have a normal conversation with her, she's all like, "Oh, but I don't know if I'm okay with this, because he got me a bunch of gifts, so I don't know, maybe I should get him back. It's the same story you've seen in other cartoons. The guy, like, he wants to get over the girl is happy at first, but she realizes that maybe he's actually better than she thought he was, so then she tries to win him back. Need I remind you that Laurie already has a boyfriend who showers her with attention and gifts, so why does she now suddenly want that with Clyde? Oh, I guess because Laurie's a spoiled brat who always wants to get what she wants. And her attempts of trying to win Clyde back were just so annoying. Like how she dresses up at Lenny at one point. I just don't feel sorry for her. I'm feeling scorned because she brought this upon herself. She was the one who wanted him to act normal, and now all of a sudden she wants that back. Just because he gives me a bunch of attention, and I should just say thank you from time to time. Not whenever he's around, just from time to time, on an occasional level. And so because of that, when Laurie actually has a conversation with Clyde, he passes out and he's right back to where he was from the start. So you made this whole thing feel completely pointless. Everything Lenny attempted to do was thrown out the window just because he wanted Laurie to have a happy ending. What the fuck, Loud House? The only thing I liked in this episode was Lenny. Like, I thought she was written well. I thought her ways of helping Clyde were alright, and I thought the scenes with Mr. Grouse were a little amusing, but other than that, I just really hated this episode, mostly due to the fact that I now see both Laurie and Clyde as uncomfortable and unhealthy people because Laurie has to rely on other people to get what she wants in order to be happy, and Clyde's still got his creepy crush on her, which I know has been greatly diminished in Season 3 with the exception of Absent Minded. But still, the fact that it's still there leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So that's why it's number 3. Anyway, so my number 2, I won't say too much about it because I'm honestly sick of the hate for it at this point, but my number 2 is No Such Luck. As much as I hate how people are still talking about this episode and still doing fan art and fan fictions on it, the hate for it is just ridiculous. You guys have to clearly acknowledge that after this episode, I think it was even confirmed at one point, that after this episode, the family got Lincoln's furniture back. Like, they love him the way he was. I think we all need to acknowledge that this episode has gone by, everything's resolved, so why are we still complaining about it if we know that what's happened has been resolved? But then again, that doesn't really excuse the problems with this episode. And I've gone on record saying that this is Lynn's worst episode. It still is. Her behavior in this episode does not get justified. She loses a game when she finally wants Lincoln to come with her, and then when he actually feels sorry for her, she suddenly labels him as bad luck. Technically, this whole thing was her fault, and she doesn't get any punishment for what she does. Even when Lincoln tells the truth, she still tells him, "Oh, I won 2 games since you left." How am I supposed to like Lynn if all she's going to do is give her brother a hard time? And yes, I know she apologizes at the end, but then that moment of sincerity is cut off with the whole "we sold all your furniture" line, which was just a giant slap in the face for what could have been a sincere moment. And as for the stuff with Lincoln, like getting kicked out of the house, like I'm just used to it at this point. To be fair, unlike the next episode on my list, Lincoln actually technically did something to deserve what he got. But that does not excuse the fact that without Lynn, he probably wouldn't have thought of that idea in the first place. And the fact that he wanted some time to himself, and yet gets punished for it, just makes us sympathize with him. And I know that's not what the episode was trying to do, but it just ends up making us feel so much sympathy for Lincoln when the episode doesn't want us to. And yeah, I won't complain about the ending, because like I said afterwards, everything's resolved, but the fact that this episode leaves that implication that Lincoln's treated like an outcast and a stranger to his family just feels sickening. Like, even when the parents jump in on that occasion, it's just heartbreaking. Like, you could get arrested for kicking out a minor. Even though I think the hate for this episode is way too much at this point, and I don't think it's really as bad as other episodes in Season 1, I still have to pick something. It is bad, but I don't think it's the worst episode of all time. But you know what is the worst episode of all time? My number 1. Now, I don't think this should surprise anybody, even though I think the hate for it is all over the place. Unlike No Such Luck, where I felt like the hate should have stopped at one point, I'm not shocked this episode got the hate that it got. I'm actually still glad it gets hate, because it is an abysmal episode. The episode I'm talking about is Brawl in the Family. fuck this episode to hell. This was one of the rare episodes that actually made me legitimately heartbroken, and not in a good way. First off, to put it bluntly, this episode has an incredibly sexist setup that was dated ages ago. This episode is not funny in the slightest. Every character besides Lincoln is either a massive idiot or an unlikable asshole, and the ending is such an insulting ending that it makes you feel like everything you knew about a certain character was thrown out the window. I said before that the hatred that Lincoln, like the punishment that he got in No Such Luck, was pretty bad. But he did nothing in this episode. He didn't do anything to deserve his punishment. All he tried to do was help Laurie and Lenny get over their fight. And yes, he made them start fighting again, and I understand this episode's implications that you should just let people, sort things out by themselves, which is fine, except the way it's executed in this episode is horrible. Because Lincoln is a character who has done this before. He helped all of his sisters in Project Loud House. He helped Lynn and Lucy get over a fight in Space Invader. Hell, even in this own sister episode, Baby Steps, we saw him helping his younger sisters out. So you can't give me that excuse that Lincoln isn't able to help a fight among his sisters, especially considering that we've seen him do this before. But the really confusing fact is that Lincoln somehow doesn't know about the protocol when he actually first hears about it. He acts like he doesn't know about it. Everybody knows about it. Even his little sisters. Even Bobby knows about it. Which doesn't make any sense. How can the only male child of the family not know about the Sister Fight protocol? Which, by the way, Sister Fight protocol, that's a stupid reason to exclude Lincoln from the fight. And so as a result, because Lincoln was somehow responsible for this, they have to pretty much torture him by kicking him out of his own room and then dumping a bunch of dirty laundry onto him because Laurie and Lenny used a blanket from his bed in their room. Which I'm just like, that's not funny. Like, this is just painful. But I think the part that really got to me was the ending, which just threw everything I thought about Lincoln out the window. So basically what happens is that at the end of the episode, the fight becomes too much for Lincoln, so he decides to stay at Clyde's for the night, and then when he comes back the next morning, big shock, everybody's suddenly back to normal. And then when Lincoln asks why, Lisa's all like, "Oh, we made up because you left. The only reason that we all made up was because Lincoln didn't interfere with anything," which is just an incredibly stupid reason as to why you made up your fight. May I also remind you that before Lincoln even left, there were points where even the sisters themselves were making things worse. Lola and Lana started fighting just because they bumped into each other, and then Lana made things even worse when she bit off some of Lisa's chart. So in some ways, even the sisters ended up making things worse. So you can't give me that excuse that this was somehow all of Lincoln's fault. And on that other implication, it ends up making me feel really upset because now it seems like everything Lincoln's done in the past has been completely glossed over, and that we don't care what good he does for us. As long as he's out of our lives, then we'll be happy. Which is just horrible. I can forgive No Such Luck for at least attempting to make Lincoln do something to get what he deserves, but in this episode there is no excuse for it. All he did was try to help his sisters, and yet somehow he deserves to be punished for it, and then told that his absence is the reason why everyone was back to normal. So in a sense, that ends up making Lincoln feel much like a black sheep because, oh, he can't help us, all he is just a burden to our family. And I know I may be overlooking this, but it's the way it's executed that gives me that implication that the sisters barely appreciate anything Lincoln does for them, and they just want him to stay out of their system so they can do whatever the hell they want, which is incredibly insulting. And when you use that ending to throw out everything you knew about a character, that is just stupid. You can't just get across messages and then act like what the character was doing in other episodes doesn't count. That is stupid. This episode almost feels non-canon because everything it has going for it completely tosses out everything we knew about other episodes before it, and it gives off that sour implication that Lincoln is nothing but a black sheep to his family. Then you end the episode on yet Lincoln screwing up again. Way to rub in the fact that you just pretty much scarred our souls, you fucking piece of shit. Yeah, if it wasn't obvious, I freaking hate this episode so much. Thinking about it just makes me angry. Not only do I think it's the worst episode of Season 2, But it's my least favorite episode of all time. I honestly wish this episode never existed. It can go to hell. So yeah, that's my bottom 5. Wow, I need a drink after that.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I heard you laughing while you were muted while I was ranting.
Oh no, I wasn't laughing.
Oh, because you did last time.
In the end.
All right.
Alright, well now it's your turn.
Now it's my turn. It's my turn. All right. I don't know how I can follow that up, but I'll see if I can. All right. So now it's time to go through my dishonorable mentions, which most of them are episodes that you guys talked about, so I'll try and keep it brief. Snow Way Out. To me, this isn't a terrible episode, but for me, okay, you know what this episode reminds me of? Snowboard. And for me, that was an episode that very much lived up to its title. It made me bored watching it. And apparently, according to Wikipedia, Snowboard is the official season finale of season 1. And if that's the case, then it's a terrible way to end off the season. And I don't mean terrible way the episode sucks. I mean that it doesn't really fit as a season finale. I mean, I know that the Loud House official wiki page says that Homespun is the season finale for season 1, but at this point, I'm not really sure, since Snowboard was the last episode to air for season 1 before they started airing season 2. Why do I bring all that up? Because No Way Out was the last episode for season 2, and it doesn't really fit as a season finale. For me, this episode just fits better if it was like somewhere around the middle of the season, or maybe earlier in the season. Like, for me, like, if it just comes off as very underwhelming as a season finale, because there's just nothing really all that memorable about it. Like, the story pretty much rips off Legends, which came out like a couple weeks before this episode. Most of the characters get nothing to do in this episode. Lana is all right, but I've seen her in Frog Wild, and honestly, she was much better in that episode. And also in Patching Things Up. And honestly, this episode, it was just boring. Like, there really is nothing. And to me, it just ended off season 2 on such a weak note. Like, I wish that they swapped this episode out with Antisocial. Much better way to end off season 2. As for this, it's forgettable and mediocre. I'm just going to move on. Leonard Takes All. I'm surprised none of you have talked about this episode, but it looks like I'm going to. Yeah, this episode is annoying, and I won't say this is Lynn's worst. I won't say this is Lynn's worst episode, but to me, this is the equivalent of everything that I don't like about Lynn. Like, I get it. She's hyperactive, and she is, like, very competitive, and she pretty much, like, is always in your face. And to me, there's a limit to, like, how much I can tolerate that. Add to that, like, her potty humor, which, I mean, if she was actually having some potty humor jokes in this episode, it probably would have made my list, but it just got cut short. And for me, again, like, the reason, like, I have this as a dishonorable mention is because it is annoying. Lynn is really annoying in this episode. Like, how she, like, comes off to everybody is just obnoxious. And there are some really corny lines in this episode, like, Leonard Chicken Dinner. That's the first obvious one. And you got gas in the boat because you're going fishing. Something like that. It was a stupid-ass line. And I mean, if I had to say anything that I kind of liked about this episode, I thought the board joke from Lenny, where, like, to throw the game, that was actually kind of funny. And I can at least admit that Lynn at least kind of learned her lesson. Like, sure, she's still gloating, but at least it's not to her siblings' faces. So at least she partially got the point, which I guess we can call that progress for now. But as it is, this is annoying. I'm moving on from that. The whole picture. Muppet already went into detail about this, but for me, if there's an episode that honestly I've just really cooled on this season, it would be this. A lot of the points out this episode, Muppet has already made. Like, Lincoln and Clyde just come off as completely idiotic. Their plan makes absolutely no sense. And I understand the sentiment of what they did at the end, where, like, the sisters were trying to help Lincoln, like, where, like, the whole message is, like, you don't need photos. Like, if you got, like, your family, they can help you remember your memories. The problem is that the memories themselves, like, they're not really memories that anybody would want to bring up. Like, who wants to bring up a memory about how you got attacked by a bunny at your birthday party? Or how you were, like, bowling for your birthday party, you got your fingers caught and you slid down the lane. Who wants to remember that? Like, that's really embarrassing. Yes. So, I mean, like, for this, it's like, I get that you're trying to be sentimental. It just doesn't work for me. And honestly, as a whole, this episode is just mediocre. I would say it's bad, but the Garfield reference, it was kind of clever. So it just saves it short of making the list. Garage Band. The Luna scene, that would have made the list, but the scene with Mr. Grouse, that was kind of funny. So it doesn't make the list. And finally, No Laughing Matter. To me, the fact that we have Head Poet's Anxiety, the fact that that episode exists, it makes me dislike this episode even more. And trust me, it was so close to making my list. Because honestly, like, I didn't like this episode the first time I watched it, and every time I go back to it, I just get annoyed by it. To me, like, again, like, there's no point in this episode existing because Head Poet's Anxiety has come out, and it basically just wrote Luann a whole lot better. Really, if it wasn't for that episode, I would be much harsher on Luann nowadays. Especially since this is an episode where, like, the whole message is, like, you know, how you shouldn't get better at what you're good at and improve on your weaknesses. No, instead, you should just tone down on what you do because you can kind of come off as annoying to some people. Condescending much, don't you think? But as a whole, again, this episode, it's bad. It's bad. And really, like, it's one of those episodes that nobody really seems to remember. And if anybody does, it's because they don't like it. So let's move on to the actual list. Starting off at number 5, we have Not Allowed. Now, I mean, this is a bad episode, and I don't like it. However, I can't really say I hate it in the same way as someone like Vossie. That being said, the flaws for this episode are very evident. Like, there are a lot of issues with it, and unfortunately, there's so many issues that the few positives that I got out of this episode, yes, there are a few positives, they weren't enough to save it. For one, I mean, just like when anybody said, Clyde just comes off pointless. I get that he's there to help his friend, but he just kind of comes off as the forced, funny sidekick, and he can't pull it off whatsoever. Like, why do we have a joke about how he sweats so much that his shoes are filled with sweat, and he had to show it? I'm like, what was the punchline? I don't get it. And I understand that some people kind of theorize about how this episode is secretly poking fun at people or fans who create these elaborate backstories for characters on shows. I don't see that in this episode at all. Like, if that's what you think this episode's about, then you do you, but I don't see it. Even more so is the fact that the comedy it's non-existent. And I mean, they try to be funny. They do. Like, again, that field test gag, oh my god, it was terrible. And, I mean, again, the few things I can say I liked about this episode. The sisters that did appear in this episode, the oldest sisters, they were a nice addition. I liked them. Some of the baby pictures I saw from them, they were kind of cute. Right, well, I mean, there's continuity issues at the wazoo with this episode, but I'm not going to get into that. The hug from the parents and Lincoln, that's kind of nice. And they at least debunked a theory, or something among a fandom, the theory, that honestly I just don't care about whatsoever. Like, who cares if Lincoln's adopted? He is a part of this family. Let's just move on. So, if anything, I'm kind of glad about this episode existing. That being said, it sucks, so I'm just going to move on. Number 4 is Change of Heart. Oh boy, this episode. Yeah, did I mention that I'm not a fan of Clyde's whole running gag of him having a crush on Lori? Now, thankfully for season 3, they have somewhat toned it down. It's not really as it doesn't really play in much of a role in episodes as it did in like season 1, or I guess I can also say in season 2. And when this plot was announced, I was like, we're finally getting an episode where Clyde's going to finally man up and get over his crush on Lori. That's what I was kind of thinking. Like, I was kind of hoping this episode would be like Clyde, like, actually developing, like, in a way, like in baby steps, which for me, I still hold as Clyde's best episode. That doesn't happen. Instead, we get an episode where Lori feels like she is making Clyde worse because he's getting over her. And the only reason why she thinks that it's her fault for why Clyde is changing is because now she's not going to get any more gifts and attention from him. Because now she, like, realizes, like, oh shit, Clyde, like, gave me, like, all of these gifts and I ignored them. I'm a terrible person. I want Clyde to have a crush on me again. How selfish are you? Seriously, like, you get annoyed at Clyde, this 11-year-old kid who has this creepy crush on you, and rightfully so. Like, if I was wearing Lori's shoes, I would feel the same way. And then after the final straw, it's like, dude, you need to get over me. Like, for me, like, after Lori said that, I'm on board with you. Clyde, I'll tell him that he needs to get over this and move on. And then the episode wants to do a 180 and just make Lori feel like she's guilty for doing this. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Seriously. And then by the end of the episode, now Lori is like, can we be friends? And that's probably my biggest issue I have with the episode, is that it shows that Lori and Clyde just seem to have completely different views on their relationship. For Lori, she wants to be friends with Clyde because it's like, he does a lot of great things for me, you know, and I should learn to appreciate him, I guess. For Clyde, it's like, yes, Lori is liking me more. I think I might finally get with her.
And Lori has a boyfriend.
And the boyfriend thing. So now it's like Lori wants to be friends with Clyde, yet Clyde still wants to get with Lori and be her boyfriend. The two don't know what they want, which makes this episode just not only confusing, but just makes everything that happened, well, really pointless, because Clyde just ends up back to where he was before, and Lori is somewhat still in the same place and has kind of digressed as a character. So yeah, this episode sucks, and I would have it lower on my list, but I'll admit, Lenny is actually pretty nice in this episode. In fact, I would say this is probably one of her best appearances in this season, so it doesn't get any higher for me. So, but still, this episode sucks. Number 3 for me is making the grade. I'm going to be brief on this because, I mean, yeah, Vossie, I don't know who, Vossie or Muppet, one of you guys went into detail about this. But yeah, this episode, that's one thing I could definitely say that I'm glad about this episode about, is that people are finally realizing that, wow, this episode sucks. Because when it came out, I hated it. For me, if it wasn't for Brawl in the Family, it'd be my least favorite episode of season 2. And now, finally, over a year later, most people are now coming to the realization that this episode does indeed suck. Because it does. Like Lisa, I've never really been the biggest fan of Lisa. And for me, this episode, it's by far and away her worst episode to date. Like, she just comes off as so annoying and condescending. And after she, does this favor for Lincoln and decides to act a little more normal, she goes overboard with it. And now it's all suddenly Lincoln's fault because he asked her to be a little different. Oh no, the horror. And then, of course, the second half of the episode is basically just Lincoln getting angry glares and getting kicked out of a van by his own sisters. Not to mention also getting told off by a random teacher, all because he asked Lisa to be a little different. So yeah, his family's mad, and even random teachers are mad at him just because of this. That's one of my biggest problems with this episode, and also with a bunch of episodes that are similar to this. The message itself is way too heavy-handed and obvious. One of the things that Loud House isn't exactly great at is delivering their messages subtly. It has to just hit you right over the head with the message saying, hey, the message of this episode is that you shouldn't change your family members for who they truly are. And of course, Lisa pretty much ends up getting none of the blame for what happened because she's a victim in all this. And really, every time I look at this episode, I'm like, we already have Toads and Tiaras, which did this episode's message a lot better. So why do we need this? So yeah, this episode blows. Let's move on. Number 2 for me goes to No Such Luck. Yeah, what else can I really say about this episode?
Hatred needs to die.
Okay, yeah, that. Now, thinking about it, I don't like this episode. I think it's pretty bad, but even then, I don't even know if it would make my top 10 for least favorite episodes in the series. If it did, it'd probably be number 8 or 9. Because for me, I can name off a bunch of episodes that are so much worse. My number 1 pick, which we're going to get to in a couple of minutes, The Greenhouse, Sound of Silence, It's a 4 Times Loud House, Making the Case, Two Boys and a Baby. Hell, I would even say that Space Invader is worse, but that's just me. Oh, and No Guts, No Glory, and I guess maybe we might as well throw in Raw Deal as well. Again, I'd have to look over my options to see which one would be worse, but that doesn't excuse the fact that No Such Luck sucks a lot. Again, all the points that are awful about this episode, you guys have already gone into detail about. Not just you guys, but pretty much everybody has. It was a fan of this show, or even anybody who casually watches the show and talk about cartoons in general. They have talked about how shitty this episode is. So for me, all I'm gonna say is it sucks, and let's just move on from it. In fact, I'm just gonna move on to my number 1 because really, what else can I say about this episode? Number 1 for me, Brawl in the Family. Okay, so here's a confession that I have. As season 2 started, I was kind of unsure of whether or not I wanted to keep watching the show or not, because season 2 was not really starting off all that great. I mean, because Love and Leaping, it was okay, but I didn't love it as much. And then we also, the rest of the episodes, they were fine, but I'm not really sure. I mean, the episodes that we did get, I mean, sure, I did like them. And thankfully, like, by the end of season 2, they did end up in my good tier. Unfortunately, the episode that kind of ended up taking a nosedive for the season, and we kind of ended up going towards a dry spell during season 2 where we got, well, I wouldn't say bad episodes, well, definitely a couple of them, but quite a few mediocre episodes. And the episode that started out was For All in the Family. This episode is total horseshit. Not only is this the worst episode in the entire series and of season 2, it might be one of the worst cartoon episodes I've ever seen. It's definitely up there with episodes like the bendy one from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends and the mystery episode from Ed and Eddie, which I'm sure Muppet will probably bring up while I'm talking.
If it smells like an Ed.
Yeah, I just thought about that episode. Holy shit, it sucks. But back to For All in the Family.
Oh, and a lot of SpongeBob and Family Guy episodes.
But For All in the Family itself, yeah, everything about this episode, it's just so obviously terrible. And not only that, it's just insulting to the viewer. It pretty much wants to try and paint Lincoln out to be the bad guy for helping, because I guess they want to be ironic. Because it's like, oh, it's so ironic that Lincoln ends up making things worse when he usually helps and makes things better. If that's supposed to be ironic, then it's ironic in a way that just comes off as insulting your audience. Not only that, the characters just come off as complete asshats. And if it's not the sisters who are just being jerks, everyone else here is a complete moron. You have Clive in this episode where they have this little skit of him playing a therapist, which has no punchline to it and just feels completely necessary. And then we get to the ending, which Yoshi has already talked about how awful it is. But yeah, he's right. It's awful. And in a way, it kind of makes me feel sad. So yeah, this episode, I don't want to spend any more time with it because Yoshi really went into detail with this, but it's horseshit, and all the hate it gets, it absolutely deserves. And if you like this episode, good on you. But for me, it can go to hell. So that's it. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go on to our best list.
Because we want to end the video on a positive note.
So let's have Vossie start.
Alright, once again, just like with the worst, I'm going to try and keep this kind of brief, but I do have a couple of episodes I can kind of mention first. Like baby steps. It's Clyde's best episode to date. It's pretty funny. It works, and yeah, that's about it. It's just Clyde's best episode, and yeah, as well as with patching things up, mostly now because it focuses on my 2 favorite siblings in the show, and yeah. But those are probably the big 2. So my number 5 is actually Fed Up. Yeah. I don't know. This episode is just fun. I think this is a very fun episode with a very fascinating premise of where like everyone is tired of all the monotonous meals, so they try to sabotage dinner. And you know what? It's a fun idea. I just love the sequences of them trying to sabotage dinner by stealing Lindsay's ingredients and his cooking utensils. And then the whole scene where they try to like. At one point where they like hide all of his goulash ingredients, I think is what I'm trying to go with here. Lenny hides it like completely in his like clothing. And what is really stupid that she does that, it kind of furthers the plot and understands like, and then eventually, you know, gets them to confess that, hey, look, we can make something else that shows that we can still make something that's nutritious for all 11 of us, but at the same time, you know, mix up the menu a little bit because we're tired of eating the same 7 meals all the time. And to be completely honest, yeah, it has a really nice ending, and it's overall just really good. Number 4 is, oh god. Friend or foe?
Fuck!
No, it's French, Moment. It's French. So just or insert French word here. This is Lisa's best episode, bar freaking none. And I like Lisa a lot, so that's saying something. This episode is just kind of cute, really. It's just... So basically, Lisa meets this new girl named Darcy, who is extremely adorable, and I wish we could see her get away frenzy, but whatever. Actually, let's be completely honest, we're never going to see Darcy in any sort of light ever again. Let's be fair.
Alright, let's save it for the end of season 3.
But yeah, let's do that.
Sorry.
Like, I really like this episode because it's like, you give Lisa... Like, Darcy is just kind of like Lisa's polar opposite, where Lisa's like incredibly smart, throwing around big words, acting a little more mature. Darcy's like really childish and doesn't really understand what Lisa's saying, and it's cute. It really is. And unfortunately, despite the fact that Lisa is only doing it so Lisa's only making a friend so she can improve improve her grades, which is definitely a little selfish, but she does eventually, understand that, of course, you can't just make friends to improve your grade, and just everything is kind of resolved in the end, I guess is kind of how to put it. Like, she realizes that what she did was wrong, which I think was really nice. It ends on a really cute note. Really, it's just a cute episode overall, and yeah, one I can easily it's one I can easily go back to. Number 3, Fool's Paradise. April Fool's Rules, I think, is alright, but this episode is great. I'm sorry, it is.
Pointless.
And yeah, Ronnie, I'm completely shoehorned in, but whatever. In this episode in particular, Luann just makes some fantastic villains. Like, all of her pranks are not torturous, they're unique, they're fun. I think my favorite thing about this is it's just fun to see the sisters get picked one by one. It's kind of, I think you guys said once it's more of in style like a horror movie or something like that. Which you got Lenny being flung up to the sign, Luna sinking in the gelatin, which is freaking hilarious once, and Lenny attacking my monkey, stuff like that. Yeah, just everything about this was just right. She actually disguises herself as an old man of the key or something like that, and then, but yeah, basically I just like that her pranks aren't torturous. Sisters getting picked one by one is fun, and just it's all around just another really fun one. Just fed up, and of course Luann also wants her revenge, which is kind of just funny as well. And number 2 is Lock and Loud. Oh boy, where do I even start with this one? Lock and Loud is hilarious. I'm sorry, there's not a single joke in this episode that I can appreciate. Well, okay, there's one, and it's Lenny being flirty to the dummy that Len's trying to train her. That was stupid, but whatever. The whole premise is definitely very fascinating, but I just love all of the ways that the sisters are training, and how how Lana's trying to teach Cliff to be a guard dog. I found that way too funny because it wasn't working at all. Combined with just all the things they try to do to up their security. Clyde is in this episode, but it's he's not that pointless, but he's not that necessary either. But honestly, it's nothing that much of a concern because at least he kind of has some point to be here. Creepy Lisa's an absolute standout. I just love that she wants the part where she wants hides cameras in the bathroom. Cameras in the bathroom? No. And the part where she wanted Lori and Lenny stool cameras. I know that some people might find that ridiculously creepy, but I'm sorry, that's funny. Because it's not really played all that straight. It's played to be funny. So I'm what? So it's not all that gross. It's funny. But yeah, that's really about it for that. It's just it's an episode that I don't really see any joke that doesn't work. Logan setting up the mouse traps, the rodent in the plans. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just a really funny episode. And finally, Frog Wild. This is probably my favorite episode of The Loud House, period. For one, it's an episode that only focuses on one sibling, that's Lana, who is, of course, my favorite, probably just because I like her tomboyish personality. Finally, we figured that out. I feel like this episode is just Lana's trying to save the frogs from being dissected, which actually really, once again, it just works. And I'm sorry, but the second, the last few minutes of this episode where Lincoln and Lana are trying to actually hide the frogs from Huggins, it's actually got some pretty solid suspense to it. It's pretty funny too. And I also really you're gonna call me so weird for this, but the scene where Lana was chewing gum in the trash, I found that kind of cute. I just really everything this episode has to offer. It's just really funny, and of course, there's no Clyde in this at all. See, Lincoln, you can basically run an episode on your own, and you see, we can't have just sisters hold an episode. We don't need Lynn. We don't need Lori or Lenny. We can do this with literally one sibling, and for some reason, we've just completely forgotten that. But I just find this a really funny episode. I just I like the chemistry between Lincoln and Lana. I like all the ways they try to save the frogs, and yeah, that's about it. It's an episode that's of course, and I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't mention the ending, where they keep the frogs in a frog fortress, a tank, and a girl who I'm assuming isn't that girl Jordan, but whatever. The older model of her. What are those two frogs doing? With Johnson then Johnson just covers it up and his glass just doesn't I know what they're going for there. But yeah, this is just overall, I didn't say much about any of these episodes, but yeah, Frog Wild is definitely my favorite episode of season 2 and the series as a whole. It's just, yeah, it just worked so well for me.
I don't even think you're trying to hide the fact that you like Girl Jordan so much.
I know, I don't think I am either.
I also assume you ship her with Lincoln.
Shut up.
So first, some honorable mentions. Antisocial. Again, I'm not going to say too much because Drew will, but this should have been the ending instead of that. Just no way out. Frog Wild. Frog Wild was a really cute episode. Lana makes the episode completely. She's just so cute in it.
Like when she's chewing the gum in the trash.
Yeah, but
I'm the only person I'll ever find that cute, let's be honest.
but there's some things of Lana I do not like bug eating, or I'm not gonna mention that episode until I'll wait till season 2. I mean, it's 3. It's season 3 of video. Job insecurity. Oh my gosh, this episode's so funny, especially when the Louds are impersonating their dads. Their dad. I love Lincoln and Luann's the most. It's just so funny what they do. All right, so now for my top 5 and my top 5. So number 5 is gonna be. I know this one is gonna be a surprise. O's for Love. Again, really cute episode. I'm glad it's not a fighting episode like, whose letter is this? No, it's mine. And then you just see a bunch of punches and fists coming at each other. I like how they all work together. And none of the sisters, and besides Bobby and Sam, which I will not spoil, unless if you already seen the episode, are non-canon. They just appeared. They're just like background characters that will never appear. They're probably in the land of forgotten, like Rocky. I'll just say number 4.
Yeah.
Number 4, Fool's Paradise. This would be if think of the Loud fan. This is like a horror movie, and the Joker is the villain. It's just so hilarious with their pranks and stuff, especially the craziness that happens in it. All right, at number 3, I have a surprise one: Room with a Feud. This is how fighting episodes should work. Nobody's mean-spirited. Everyone's at the same level. And it's just a really funny episode. Even though, again, the gag with Lincoln in the end, if you didn't have it included, it would have been much higher. But overall, I really like this episode. And at my number 2 spot, number 2 is Chaos. I'm cheating it because it's a special, but yeah, this is really good.
Oh crap, I think I actually forgot about Relative Chaos and Love and Odds leaving, didn't I? Or did I mention them?
You didn't mention that.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say them because I'm like, I was excluding them because they're specials, but whoops.
Yeah, Relative Chaos is just a really great special. Even though I kind of think the idea of a spin-off is a little Cleveland Show and Planet Sheen-like, the character, just the special was good. And my number 1, is Potty Mouth. Funniest episode in the series. Oh my god. The idea of Lily swearing and she got from her siblings, even Lisa, is just so funny, and just the methods they take. And they did a diaper joke right when Lisa was the baby and she defecates herself, and they have and Lincoln's like, Lisa, why did you do this? And she's like, you told me to act like a baby. There's no pleasing you people. It's so funny. And the ending, I'm not going to spoil it, but man, that is funny shit. Yeah. So overall, the episodes I chose were really funny with a little bit of heartfeltness. But man, season 2, man, this was a really funny season, even though there was some down peaks.
Sweet. So it's your turn, Yosh.
Alright, so just like with my worst list, I'm gonna be talking about some quick honorable mentions that were really close to making my list. Actually, not as easy as my least favorites, because man, so many episodes this season were bloody fantastic. So yeah, my first honorable mention, Potty Mouth. I'm not going to say much about this because Muppet already talked about it, but yeah, this episode's pure gold with its comedy. Like, everything here just made me laugh so badly, and that ending, Man, I don't know if this episode got censorship, but that sucks if it did. My next honorable mention is Party Down. I thought this was one of Laurie's best episodes, even though I still admit that her best episode was Affair to Remember. Still, I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really sweet to see all the siblings hanging out together and having fun at a party. It was just really sweet, and it was seeing Laurie trying to learn not to try and grow up so fast and just learn to have fun with her family, which is portrayed much better than how it was done in GarageBand. Yeah, and next up is Sweet and Sour. In my opinion, this is No Guts, No Glory done right, because unlike that episode where everyone was just acting like a complete idiot, in this episode, they're only doing like very tame stuff. They're just simply trying to have fun, not realizing that what they're doing is affecting the parents, and then when they realize that what they did was wrong, even though it wasn't the reason they got kicked out, they try to make up for it. They try to give their parents their own custom-made hotel to try and get them to relax, which I thought was really sweet. And my final honorable mention, Antisocial. You know, if it wasn't for job insecurity, this would probably be Lynn Sr.'s best episode. The development here was just so well done, and it actually surprisingly had this message of trying to stay off technology and just do something good with your family, which is better than a certain movie that I've watched. But yeah, this episode handled that message really well. It was great seeing the characters interacting with each other. It was just really great. Not much to say about it. Alright, so now it's time for my actual top 5 list. It's about the same as my Season 2 video if you want to go watch that. I'm not going to go into much detail because some episodes I think I'm going to let Drew talk about because, oh boy. Alright, so my number 5 is No Spoilers. Now, at this point, I no longer think this is Lenny's best episode because that would probably go to Shop Girl. That's probably now my favorite Lenny episode. And who knows, maybe that upcoming episode, Everybody Loves Lenny, will be really good. But yes, this episode, I thought it was one of Lenny's best portrayals in Season 2. Definitely above Change of Heart, even though I really liked her in that episode. Even though I am a little bummed out that once again, she's being treated like an obstacle rather than an actual character. Still, it's nice to see her here. I love the scenes when she was interacting with Lincoln. I thought it was really cute, even if he didn't enjoy it. And, you know, seeing the siblings getting angry at each other for trying to figure out a plan and stuff like that, it was really funny. Number 4, Fool's Paradise. I'm gonna say I don't think I'll ever see an April Fool's episode as funny as this one. Like, it played much like a horror movie with the Joker as the villain. I'm pretty sure Muppet already said that. But yes, this episode, pure comedy gold. I loved it so much. The jokes here, the little gags here were so funny. Like Luna falling into the Jello or Lucy being sun-bleached. The little gags here were so funny. And that ending, oh man, that ending. I was a little hyped up because I thought it would signify something amazing, but no, what we got up was actually a pretty bad episode in Season 3. But regardless, still this episode exists, and I love it. Number 3, Friend or Foe. I don't care. I'm pronouncing it as Foe. But yeah, this episode, the reason I love this episode is mostly because of how it treats the spectrum of autism, because, you know, since I'm in that category, this episode, I think it does a really good job of showing that spectrum, because it shows Lisa struggling to be friends with someone. She has to use like a device to know how they interact with each other. And Darcy is freaking cute as ever, oh my god. And the friendship between her and Lisa was just adorable. I loved it so much. It's so cute. Hard to say if it's funny, but I don't care. Everything was just so sweet that I just couldn't help but just tear up when Lisa was like, oh, I can't be friends with you anymore, which is so sweet. Number 2 goes to Job Insecurity. Man, out of all the episodes I've watched, I'd say this one is the funniest. I can't think of one joke in this episode that I didn't laugh at. Everything here was so well done. The little background gags in this episode, the neat little touches to make the comedy work was so great. The whole breakfast burrito thing was handled so well. And I'm glad, because it could have gone in that direction of being really annoying. Like, the siblings trying to impersonate their dad were funny. And Mr. Grouse. Oh man, Mr. Grouse was so funny. The stuff he does in this episode is not just funny, but man, it had me pissing my pants with laughter, and it even helps that it ends that way. And it's good to see an episode come out where before that we actually had some foreshadowing, because Lin Senior was trying to attempt to cook and he wants to own his own restaurant, and then it will be further carried on in season 3, an episode I don't think fondly of, but still, seeing him trying to get his dreams in this episode to accomplish, yeah, it was really well done here. Now, my number 1, I'm not going to say too much about it, because I think I'm going to let Drew talk about it, but that's L is for Love. Now, just to put it bluntly, I'm going to be really quick on this. This episode has every character being used well, has a really great ending, has some nice character portrayals, no fighting, thankfully, some cute little interactions. Yeah, not much to say, but I love this episode. I think it's still one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, and that's really saying something. So yeah, that's my top 5. I know I didn't really say much about it, but hey, when you're talking about good episodes, what more can you say about them?
Awesome. So now that leaves me. All right, let's get through my honorable mentions. Potty Mouth. All right, so I've kind of gone on about how I am really not a fan of potty humor. This is the episode where they actually use potty humor in a way that I actually found to be humorous. But it's not just that. A lot of the jokes in this episode worked really well. The characters were all used very well. It didn't really seem like anybody was underused or overused. Everyone had their fair share of screen time, their moment to shine, and the ending was by far and away one of the funniest endings I've ever seen in the entire series. Yeah, this episode is great, and whenever people talk about it, they talk about it positively, and I'm glad they do. It's a great episode. Pet peeves. Yeah, I think I'm the only one that has this in his honorable mentions, but I don't care. I actually really enjoyed this episode, and even though I haven't been clamoring to see an episode about the pets, I'm not going to complain because this episode was just really enjoyable to watch. I like how it was an episode that it was from the pets' perspective, and I'm glad that they didn't give them voices and whatnot. Instead, if they actually interacted like animals. And there are a number of really good jokes in this episode too, like the confusing the butt thing that Luna has, kissing it. I don't care what anybody says. I thought that was funny. The joke where they were pretty much kind of making fun of those the Sarah McLachlan commercials, where it's this animal shelter, it needs a new home. These pets, are you going to help? And they give close-ups of the puppy eyes and everything. I just found that to be really funny. I really enjoyed the climax, even if it's completely ridiculous with what happens. It's really enjoyable. And yeah, this movie, not movie. Actually, I was gonna say movie in a sec because this episode reminds me of a certain movie that I saw and I didn't care for. Secret Life of Pets. Yeah, this episode is better than that entire movie. So that says a lot.
Yeah, the movie.
The loudest mission. Okay, yeah. I'm going to call it Relative Chaos because I'm not going to call loudest mission Relative Chaos. That's a mouthful. But yeah, Relative Chaos. Unlike a lot of other people, I actually really like this episode. In fact, I would actually say this is my favorite special out of all of them. For as much as I don't like Ronnie Ann, I'm glad that we finally got some development out of her. The introduction of the Casa Grande is great. I really enjoyed all of them. Most of the comedy landed pretty well, and even though I do have a couple of nits, for the most part, everything flows really naturally with this episode. And since we have the Lost Casa Grande special coming up, now all of you Ronnie Ann fans can stop bad-mouthing this episode for saying that it wrote Ronnie Ann off. Well, she's going to be she's going to have her own series coming up, so you don't have to complain anymore. But as a whole, Relative Chaos, it's a really enjoyable episode. I loved it. It was great. No spoilers. This was an episode that I don't know if I would call it Lenny's best episode. I'm kind of divided on whether or not this or Shop Girl is my favorite. But for me, this was by far and away Lenny's best episode in the series. And keep in mind that season 2 was not a good season for Lenny at all. She was pretty much, her character was mostly written in episodes to just play as the dumb one. And she was played so dumb to the point that it just wasn't funny anymore. And it just became tiresome. Thankfully, this episode plays to her strengths. She does come off as ditzy, but not to the point where it just makes her come off as a brainless moron. Not to mention, they also contribute her other personality traits, like her passion for fashion and the fact that she's a very nice person with a heart of gold. Plus, the other siblings all get their fair chance, all get their scenes in this episode where nobody feels underutilized. The story flows along really naturally. If I had to nitpick with this episode, again, just like Yoshi said, like Lenny's kind of written as more of like an obstacle for all the other characters instead of like as an actual character. So it does keep this off the list. Still though, I love the episode. It's great. And Sweet and Sour. Yeah, this episode is by far one of the funniest I've ever seen in this series. And I don't think too many people talk about it, which is a shame. I mean, granted, season 2 did also have a lot of other great episodes, which is probably why people don't talk about this as much. But still, like, I do kind of wish that this was talked about more, because this really is an episode where the comedy is at its absolute finest. It's a premise that could have gone wrong in all kinds of ways. The family staying at a hotel and madness ensues. This could have been terrible. It doesn't. Like, the comedy is very on point. Nothing comes off as mean-spirited or cringeworthy. It flows perfectly, and the ending wraps everything up perfectly well because the siblings feel bad about what they did because they think that it's their fault for them getting kicked out of the hotel, and so they make it up to their parents. That is until we realize that, well, it was the parents that actually got them kicked out of the hotel in a way that, in a scene that I'm surprised actually managed to air on TV. Still, though, like, it's a hilarious episode. I loved it. It's definitely one of my favorites from Season 2, although didn't really quite make the list. So starting out my list at number 5, I have Antisocial. So this really should have been the episode to end off Season 2. Just like how Homespun was the perfect episode to end off Season 1, this should have been the episode to end off Season 2. And I really do love what this episode does, even despite the fact that it has, well, let's just say a plot that could have been, well, a little preachy. Like, it could have gone in the direction that The Greenhouse did, where it tries to have this message, which for that episode is about saving the environment, and it just goes horribly wrong. This episode doesn't do that. Instead, it's an episode that it doesn't really try to make using technology look terrible, but instead it makes overusing technology to the point where it's controlling your life look terrible. And that's something that I think a lot of people can relate to, especially to people who don't use technology as much, and they're discovering something that's brand new. So much to the point that they become addicted and it's taking over their lives. And I love how this episode utilizes that for Lynn Sr.'s character. And even I'll admit that he's been getting a few too many episodes, especially recently. I'm still not going to complain because he is fantastic here in this episode. I really loved how he was written here. He was very enjoyable to watch. And in a way, I did kind of sympathize with him a little bit. I mean, getting over something that you invested so much time in, that is a hard thing to try and get over. And which for him, it's technology. But I love how in the end he does finally stops becoming super addicted to technology as with his family again. And we get a really nice ending where it pans out of the house and we have like all of them like behind the window having a great time as a family. I'm like, that is a great ending. Why don't we get more endings like this in the series? Why don't we?
Because comedy.
Right, like it's an episode that doesn't like stuff its foot in its own mouth and just like says a stupid line to end the episode, which unfortunately a lot of episodes in the series have done that. It's nice and simple. And thankfully the comedy here, for the most part, works really well. And once again, everybody gets their chance to shine. Like, that's what I think, that's what the best episode for me, Loud House has, where nobody feels underutilized, everybody gets their chance to shine, and they do something that, like, even if not everybody, like, says something that would be memorable, they can at least do, at least every character can do one thing where, for somebody who likes that character, it stands out. And again, like, for as much as I think that Loud House isn't really that great when it comes to like poking fun at modern technology or just like modern trends, this is the episode that comes the closest to actually making it work. Like with how like all the things that Lynn Sr. does, where he really has become invested in using all this technology. Like even to the point where like even for dinner, it's like whenever he's cooking dinner for his family, he has to do it where he's live streaming himself cooking the dinner for an audience. Like, he's become that addictive. And, again, it's a little bit clever. I mean, I wouldn't exactly say it's absolutely hilarious. Like, when it comes to meta comedy and animation, I'll still stick with OKKO. But it's still done in a way here that I can at least give it a thumbs up. So, yeah, Antisocial, I love this episode. By far and away one of my favorites of Season 2, and I definitely do recommend it. Number 4 for me is Fool's Paradise. I'm not a fan of the April Fool's episodes. Like, right now, I've been kind of going on debate on which is worse, April Fool's Rules or Fool Me Twice. I mean, for April Fool's Rules, you had, like, some really cruel behavior that was all for the point of quote-unquote comedy. But then again, in Fool Me Twice, you pretty much have it where there's no comedy in it whatsoever. It's just all about ruining all of the family's social reputation. So, not sure which one is worse, but I'll probably think about it again at some other point. As for Fool's Parent, for me, this is using that April Fool's premise and actually utilizing it well. Because the pranks here are creative, the punchlines, like, they are different. And again, like, this episode is a full-on joke. Like, this is a satire of slasher movies. You don't take this seriously whatsoever, and it's completely clear, and it's really clear that nobody in this episode is taking this seriously. Like, right when Lynn Sr. confesses to how he was helping Luann all along to Lincoln, like, he pretty much breaks down, and it's just so over the top, like you would see in any other horror movie. It's hilarious. And I also gotta give props to the fact that they actually had Luann get her comeuppance this time around. Of course, after she ends up getting pranked, she does the typical like horror movie villain killer thing where like, you may have got me, but I'll come back for you. And again, like, there are so many great jokes in this episode, and it flows along great. I mean, I don't want any more April Fool's episodes, especially after what we had for Fool Me Twice in Season 3, which I'll talk about that episode at the end of Season 3 in a different video. But as it is, this episode is hilarious, and if you do dislike this episode, then I get why. I mean, the April Fool's episodes, they're generally polarizing amongst the fandom. But you know what? I'm going to give this a pass. It's really enjoyable. I loved it. Number 3 for me goes to Party Down. Here's something that kind of surprised me. This episode gets a surprising amount of hate. Well, I don't really know if I want to call it hate, but dislike. Well, actually, no, dislike might not be the right word. Discontent. You know what? I'm just going to shut up. So for this episode itself, like, a lot of people like have said that this is boring and that it's a pointless episode and that it's very much an episode that didn't even need to exist, and it's just a slog to get through. And I get why, but here's the thing, is that Laurie, she can make far worse episodes. Garage Band, Change of Heart, No Guts, No Glory, and probably by the end of the season, Self-Improvement, depending on my mood for that episode. But Party Down, for me, this was by far and away the best thing Laurie had done all season long. And Party Down for me is an episode that gets slept on way too much by fans. It's an episode that is one of the more slice-of-life episodes. It's an episode that isn't really doing a lot, and I'm glad it isn't doing a lot. It's an episode that's about a party that Laurie is holding, and she believes that since she's almost an adult, she can't, like, throw fun parties. She has to act like she has to put on this facade of where she's throwing these fancy parties and, like, has to have, like, this snooty food and, like, play, like games and activities that would be for adults, and by adults I mean adults in their late 30s who are having a game night at their family house. But my point still stands that for this episode, what I like here is that the comedy is subtle, which is something that Loudhouse doesn't really do all that much, is that the comedy just doesn't really come off as like over the top and wow, hence the title of the series. But I like that a lot of the jokes come through more of the dialogue, and it's actually funny. And once again, just like the other picks on this list, the characters all get their chance to shine here. And I kind of feel like everybody here puts in great work. I like how all the siblings were used in this episode. And for me, the standout obviously goes to Laurie. And even though I have my issues with Laurie as a character, I really do like how she's written in this episode. Where even though she is kind of like acting, let's just say, like a little unreasonable, like how like she wants to make sure this party goes exactly like how a magazine would go and how like it's supposed to go this way and whatnot. In a way, I do kind of get it. Like, Laurie is at that age where now that she's becoming an adult, she has to grow up. And unfortunately for her, her way of growing up is just putting on this facade of just throwing adult parties, when really that's not it. I mean, yeah, you're almost 18, but that doesn't mean that you should stop throwing fun parties. It's your party. You should do what you want with it. You're the person that's making the party, and you should make it fun for everybody. And I like that Laurie learns that lesson here in the episode, and it leads to a great ending. So, yeah, not much to say. I love this episode. I think it doesn't get as much recognition, and you should definitely check it out. It's fantastic. Number 2 for me goes to Job and Security. Yeah, I absolutely love this episode. Not only is it one of my favorites of season 2, it's one of my favorites in the entire series. And just like the Party Down, this is an episode that doesn't get talked about as much, And it's not that it gets a negative reception. Far from it. A lot of people definitely love this episode, but when it comes to season 2, it's not as discussed as much, especially when you get to episodes like, well, my number 1 that I'm going to get to in a couple minutes, along with Friend or Foe. Episodes that I think are overrated that people loved, but that's a different conversation. For job security, like, there's a lot that really works here for this episode. And one of the things that I very much wanted to see from this series is continuity. Not a lot of it, but continuity. Like, we get some of it. And I like that we actually got some of it here with this episode, where it kind of was continuing this storyline with Lynn Sr. about how, like, throughout season 2, like, we've mainly been seeing him cooking. And it's mainly been in the background or a part of some episodes, like Fed Up. And for here, it plays more of a central role, where it turns out that he quit his IT job to be a dishwasher at a restaurant. And unfortunately, the kids don't know that, and they believe that it's their fault for why he got fired. So they're pretty much going to do everything they can to find another IT job for Lynn Sr. And it leads to a pretty hilarious sequence with Mr. Krause, who I'm just going to say he's by far my favorite side character in the series. Like, every time he shows up in an episode, he just makes it a lot better. And, like, there are so many funny jokes in this episode during the sequence where they're teaching him how to use a computer, do all of these, like, certain things with an IT job. And I've already said it before, but I'll say it again. Every character gets a chance to shine, with probably my favorite, well, being Luna, who shows up in a nerdy outfit, which, of course, ended up becoming, like, a fan art meme among the fandom, which I'm actually kind of glad. It was cute. And then we get to the ending where again, Lynn Sr. ends up saying, like, you know, I quit the job and I'm now this dishwasher at this restaurant. And I really like how the ending is executed here, where, like, the kids kind of realize, like, that they did kind of mess up on some things, and they want to help Lynn Sr., and now he, like, gets promoted at his job. The scene with Lowell on the phone, that was hilarious, by far and away, yeah. And another comparison I can make with this episode is with Cheater by the Dozen. Unlike that episode, which I entirely forgot about, don't care about, this is an episode that takes a premise that's very similar and actually knows how to execute it well. It has a somewhat mystery to it, but again, it works because it's written better, the characters are actually amusing to watch, and it actually has a really satisfying ending to it. So yeah, I love this episode. It's definitely one of my favorites in the series, but not my favorite of season 2. That goes to L is for Love. I don't really know much else I can say about this episode. I mean, this is an episode that a lot of people love, although let's just say, like, some people aren't really quite on the same level. In fact, after this episode came out, some people were kind of like, you know, it's only an okay episode, and there are a bunch of people who just straight up quit the show because they didn't like the fact that, well, Luna came out as bisexual. Well, yeah, there was also that. Season 2 is very eventful, but honestly, I think that's ridiculous because I'll pretty much talk about what I can with this episode, because a lot of this, what's been talked about this episode has been talked about by so many other people, but I'll just share what I love about this episode. The characters, like, all of them get a chance to shine. I love how all of them are used. None of them come off as more annoying to me. And while I can understand the complaint that people would have about how the crushes don't really have much personality, they don't really do anything, but that's the thing. They're crushes. They're pretty much just like how the main characters view them. So the fact that they don't really, like, show much personality, I feel like that was kind of the point of the story. It's mainly just an episode that's from the main character's point of view, just on how they view these characters. And I kind of feel like if we learned about each of these characters in this one episode, it would be too much. Which is why I'm glad that they didn't really explore that too much. And again, it focused more on the fact that they view them as their crushes and that they want to get to know them more. And, like, again, the comedy was very on point. And of course, like, my favorite part of this episode is Luna, who was wildly misused in season 2. Even though people will say this is, like, a Luna episode, I have a hard time buying that, because it's like, yeah, she does kind of play a major role in the episode, but the main focus isn't on her. When I think of an episode that is considered a so-and-so episode, like, this is a Lola episode, this is a Lynn episode, I mainly focus on the fact that the episode is directly focused on them. This episode, it's not in it, but it's not her episode. For me, this is a siblings episode, because Luna gets as much doing this episode as the other siblings do. And I remember the first time I did see this, I was surprised with how it was going. Because like I kind of figure if like the first half of the episode I'm like, okay, this is cute, and then like Luna actually gets more to do. And keep in mind, this is midway through season 2, where Luna was pretty much in the background for most of the season. She really didn't get much to do. I loved how she was used in this episode. And then of course there's the ending scene where it turns out it's a girl named Sam. And this scene was okay. You know what? Yeah, I'm gonna say it's my favorite ending in the series. I don't care what anybody says. It's an ending that, for me, it goes against what the title of the show is, and it delivers its ending in a subtle way. I wish more episodes in the series had done this. And really, there's so much more to talk about that I love with this episode. Like how we get a backstory to how Lynn Singer and Rita met, which ties into the plot really well. And I could also talk about, like, again, like some more of the comedic moments that I enjoyed. Hell, there's a big gag from Lynn involving a jockstrap that I didn't entirely hate. I mean, it actually kind of fit with the episode. I didn't mind it all that much. Really, not too much I can say. I love this episode. It's my favorite episode in the series, my favorite episode of season 2, and it's an episode that it's one of the episodes I definitely come back to the most when it comes to the series. This, Road to Nowhere, Job and Security, Project Loud House, and For Bros About to Rock. And yes, I just gave my 5 favorite episodes in the whole series, which will probably change at some other point, but I might as well talk about it now. And yeah, as you can already tell, this is my favorite episode of season 2. I loved it. So yeah, we talked about a lot today.
Yeah, we did. Really needed to get that out of our system, because this has been on the back of our heads for a long time.
Oh yeah, I'm glad. But we finally got it off our chest, and yeah, I'm glad I talked about those episodes. So, anyways, so now we want to know, what do you guys think? Like, do you agree with our list? Do you disagree with our list? Do you want to come up with your own list for favorite episodes of season 2? Let us know in the comments below. And if you don't want to give your favorites, you can give your least favorites. It's all up to you.
And don't forget, we'll try to not forget about this when season 3 is done, because oh boy, season 3's got a lot to talk about. So we'll try.
Oh yeah, season 3, we're gonna have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we'll try. We'll definitely try harder this time to not be late with season 3, because it's gonna be really interesting to talk about. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
So yeah, that's gonna wrap up our episode of Talking Loud. As for our next podcast, well, we don't know when the next episodes are coming out. It's supposed to be coming out next month in October. So until then, we're going to be starting to release episodes that we recorded previously for episodes that we talked about in season 2. So look out for that. And until next time, I am CynicTheCritic.
Anglophile Gamer.
Yoshi Player.
I'm hungry.
And we'll see you next time.